Welcome to How to Be a Humane Leader Without Losing Your Job. We're here to chat about humane leadership in a way that's real and relatable, tackling work-life challenges, and offering practical advice to navigate tough decisions. Whether you're leading a team or navigating your own career, we got you covered. I'm Roberto Torres, a software engineer leader, and with me is Chris Ollerkin, a Fortune 100 IT leader. We'll dive into the real world stuff, share experiences, and offer guidance on leading with compassion while keeping your career on track. Today, we will discuss how a humane leader enhances the team based on personality assessments. Good morning, Troy. How are you?
I'm doing good, thank you very much. And this is an interesting topic about personalities, since we are both from kind of very different cultures too, on top of it.
Yes, actually. And regardless of the culture, I think that personality assessments are an excellent tool to understand who you are, how do you react based on certain situations, and to be unbiased because we might be biased because something happens. But yes, it's an interesting topic at all.
Absolutely, absolutely. And regardless of culture or where we grew up or what country, there are different perspectives on how we use information and how we interact with others, regardless of national culture, just based on human behavior differences. And some of these tests and assessments, I think, are helpful. I think it can certainly, when you're meeting all new people, it can be very helpful. In a big company, we use them quite a bit because you're constantly, acquiring whole companies and meeting new teams that you'd never worked with before. So we had both the cultural aspect, right? They're from completely different countries, but also we had to be up to speed on their personalities really quick to understand maybe best ways for us to interact with them to get the most results.
Yes, indeed. And the thing about startups is that I think the very, very, very few uses this kind of personality assessments. They are more focused on, hey, we had to create product, we had to deliver, we had to reach product market fit, but they don't understand that these kind of assessments are really important, especially for us humane leaders, because we require for the team members to understand who they are. Uh, do they really know which kind of personality are they in? Are they maybe more focused on action, the analytical stuff, or are they more they have a bigger way on how do they create bonding and rapport that other stuff. I think that is really important, not only to understand who you are, but also how do you act and act with your peers, with your manager, with your reports. Otherwise, you will be thinking maybe in a 2D way, on a two dimension when you interact with someone else, instead of maybe multiple dimensions according to the person and to the situation.
Yeah, because if you're, and obviously when you're dealing with someone one-to-one, you can fine tune your approach, your style of discussion, whether it is just more fact-based and all we talk about is just the facts, or whether the person is maybe more feelings-based, so you can elaborate more and think about the impact of how is this going to impact how we implement this at work, and who will be impacted might be more important for different people. Unfortunately, when you got a team, and let's say you're addressing 10 or 15 people, you're going to have a distribution of all kinds of different personalities. So then you got to use a blended approach, right? Some of it is going to be outline the facts on a chart in a table, and those analytical personalities are going to be focused on that chart, and you can let them just focus on the chart and the numbers. And while they're doing that, then you can provide some of the emotional and feeling context of how this is going to change people's lives. And then the feelers in your team can, while the analytical people are staring at the chart, your feelings people can start thinking about how is this going to impact our customers, our other teammates, and so on. And it does take a while to believe in these personality assessments. We did them multiple times, lots of times. If we were going to leadership class, they would do them and then share them with everybody in class so you could understand how they were. If it was a new acquisition, we bought a company, let's say, and you were acquiring a team, we would sometimes invest in getting those assessments of those new team members so we could quickly bring them into the fold of our culture. But a key thing I want everybody to understand is they're only as good as the people are honest in filling them out, and they're only as good as the humane leader observes that did that teammate really do it truthfully and honestly, like self-reflecting.
Mm-hmm.
Because if their Myers-Briggs, let's say, says that they're highly analytical and they just want the facts, but your observation is the first thing when they come into your office to talk to you is, how was your weekend? How are your kids doing? Man, it's really hot out today, and I'm glad I don't have to fight the football World Cup traffic today. Maybe they're not 100% in that kind of analytical mindset if they spend a little more time socializing than you would expect.
Yeah, well, that is for a certain kind of personality assessments, but there are other personality assessments. I'm not a psychological guy. You know that I'm an IT, an engineer, but in one that the company gave us, show us to the conscious and the subconscious. The conscious is where you are at work. How do you react? What are the things that you do? And the not conscious is when you are at home. So I think that we human leaders have to guide our team members to understand that we are at work and we have to be at work, and our mindset has to be at work, not when we are at home. You mentioned an example that some analytical guy might be saying, hey, let's talk about the World Cup and etc. And that maybe it's not related to personal assessment. Maybe that is related to a cultural way of thinking. Because here in Mexico or in Latam, we think that. That doesn't mean that we don't think about work, but since we are flooding with the World Cup, when we start talking about, and maybe in a meeting with some other Mexicans or Latin people, we will be talking about the World Cup. So it was a little bit of deviation over here, but I think it's important to understand who we are at work, who we are not at work, outside work, and how do we humane leaders recognize ourselves and recognize other people, because you cannot talk with your team members the same as you do for everybody. You have to understand them. If it's a new team, well, you have to create to build rapport. You have to make a connection, a bond with them to fully, not maybe fully, but to understand them. But if you are in a team that has been going for several years, well, you know how to act with them because you recognize them, right?
Absolutely. And how do you, when you first came into the company you're at now, right? You were the new guy coming in.
Yeah.
And again, as you stated, the small startups typically don't do these expensive personality tests because they cost a lot of money. how did you kind of do personality assessments without the formal study?
Sure. Um, what I always do with a new team member, either I mean a new squad or a join or someone else joins, is I have a roadmap with one-on-ones. And the first one that I tell them is the version 0 of one-on-one. And what I say is that I open myself to them. And for that, I begin asking some questions. And when I ask them those questions, I answer them myself as well. So, for instance, an engineer might be in a technical track or a management track. Technical, it will be related to all software, etc. And they could go from tech lead to staff engineer to a VP to, and a management track, there will be from tech lead, there will be a manager and maybe a director, and they will go on. So whenever I ask them something to answer, I do the same. I do the same. I answer that same question, and from there, every time that we go one-on-ones, I begin asking some questions that could be related to hard skills, to soft skills, and begin creating a path, and a knowledge base, you could say, about how these team members are. It's like yesterday I had two one-on-ones, and one of them was action related. This engineer is action related. He wants to have more, to learn more, to gain more challenges. And the other engineer was related to, hey, I want to become a senior, but I don't have the soft skills traits. How do I do that? What I have to accomplish to learn. So I do that, and I always write down everything, not everything, but the most important thing about each person. So I have my methodology or my personal way of doing things.
Very good. Very good. Yeah, I think that helps a lot. And and I think even just for the humane leader to recognize that everyone isn't like us, right? I can remember a very beginning of leadership, my very first time, leading, is making the mistake that you think more of the people are like yourself than you think. So you think like maybe 80% of the team is just like me, when in reality, it's probably more like 3% of the team is just like you, and almost nobody is just like anybody else. And, it's just one of those maturity things, being a young, naive leader at the beginning. You just haven't experienced the world enough. You knew from school and grammar school and grade school and high school that there's a lot of different personalities, people you enjoyed being with, people that you didn't, people that you knew were smart, people that you knew were not that smart, people that you knew were very motivated, people that you knew were not very motivated. But you don't really, as a young person, build that into how do you manage all those different personalities until you get a little more experience. And then
Yes.
as you become the leader and you make some mistakes, and that's important as a humane leader to recognize that. I've certainly realized very early on, wow, more people are not like me than are like me. So how do I deal with that differently? How do I still get the results that they hired me and promoted me to do, to get these same results with different methods? Because what motivated, what my humane leader, because I generally had humane leaders in UOP, what they coached me on, or what they showed me by their leadership, was, you need to set different goals in different ways for different people to still achieve the company's results. And some people were very much give them the list of tasks and due dates and let them loose, and they'll come to you when they need help. Other people was, you know what, if you give them more than 3 of the 50 tasks that need to get done, they're overwhelmed if you give them all 50 at once. So instead, you give them 3, they finish 1, you give them 1 more. They finish 2, you give them 1 more. Then load up their queue back to 3 full things that they're focused on. And you tell them there's more work, but you don't share details of it too much, right? Because their personality, for their personality, they needed smaller bites of work, smaller things so that they could feel that sense of accomplishment more frequently. Versus some people, you could give them the whole list of 50 things for the year, and they're knocking them off one by one, but they can, they would self-manage those 50 tasks, and they had deadlines for each of them, and they got their sense of achievement, even though, man, looking at 50 things to do for the year is pretty overwhelming to most people. But again, you got to figure out which ones work and work the best way, I guess, is the way I would put it. Some people need a smaller task list to feel those accomplishments and successes more frequently. So they feel that sense of accomplishment weekly or monthly. Other people, well, I only need a success on a quarterly basis.
Yeah, indeed. And I totally agree with you. And something important, 2 things. One, it's a positive, and the other is a negative stuff about this. A positive is, imagine that twins, 2 twins, okay? They came from the same womb, and they look alike, but beneath them, not beneath them, within them, they are different. They might act different. That one might be introverted, the other one might be extroverted. So it's important to recognize beyond what you see. It is what you interact, is how these people do stuff. You mentioned quiet ones. I'm a quiet one. I I barely spoke at meetings. That doesn't mean that I don't want to. I think that whenever it's required for me to say, I will say it. But I don't throw a bunch of words and phrases because, hey, I want to be noticed. I'm a quiet guy. So it's important to recognize if you had, for instance, twins, what are their personality traits? How do they interact in stressful situations, in not stressful situations? Are they best analytical or not? That's why personality assessments are important. But if I go to the second point, it is negative for the leader to know about the personality assessments of everybody. That is something that is personal, and an individual has to have, but doesn't have to share. I think once I was at a startup company, and that company, yes, they did a mild personality assessment. And when I said to HR, hey, are you going to share this with me? No, because this is personal. This is all really related to the individual who did the assessment, and they had to know. The thing is, how do you interact with each team member that you have? For that, you must understand that since people are different, and you mentioned it, Chris, is important for you to be like trial and error. Maybe you will add uh, maybe an actionable set of items with someone who will say, hey, don't throw all this to me. And maybe if you do that to other team member, that team member will say, hey, bring it on. I like it. This is the kind of stuff that I thrive in, that I love. So it's important for you to always communicate. Second, to have active listeners. Third, to see what's going on in different situations, and to be communicating, and for all your team members to express what they feel, and what are the emotions on this. And if you apply emotional intelligence, you're going to be understanding the personality assessment they did and going to match, and your team is going to rock, actually.
Yes, absolutely. And again, it's one of those things where while the professional studies on these personalities, they've invested a lot of money in um, refining them over large groups of people. The humane leader always takes into account that everyone is unique, and you kind of have to determine what's really best for that person. So by taking your time, kind of observing, did this method I used with coaching the person, was it successful or not? What do I need to change? Were they more detail oriented or were they more feeling oriented? Did they care more about what the impact was or what the goal is? And, it's just something over time as the humane leader gets the opportunity to interact with people, they begin to realize maybe some of the study was right and some of the techniques that you use are appropriate and some are not. And you make that judgment call as a humane leader versus a boss who's going to just dictate, okay, your chart said you like the list, I'm giving you the whole list, not realizing that, yeah, maybe the person, it doesn't really function really well that way. So be a humane leader and tune it for each person.
Yes, 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 indeed. Um, One thing to before we wrap up this episode, it is a question for you. Uh, when you had, since you were in such big companies as Honeywell and UOP, when you had these kind of assessments, was there, if you remember, was there a match between your thoughts and how you behave at the company?
You mean as of my own assessment
Yes.
of I'd say that it was mostly correct, mostly correct. Um, but again, I think it gets back to the how honest are you with yourself to do it. And I think if you answer the questions because you think you're trying to please your supervisors and the management of the company, then the assessment is not, going to tell you much. But if you're truly honest with it and you do it, it's accurate. And for mine, it did show the split personality of my at home behavior versus my at work behavior. In other words, I was much more extrovert at work, and I'm much more extrovert in our humane leadership. But in reality, I'm much more of an introvert. I much
Mhm.
prefer small groups of people. I'd much rather interact with somebody one to one than in a party of 50 people. So that's the other thing to realize with some of these things. There is your work personality, as you mentioned, and then there's your home personality, and they are two completely different things.
Got it. Well, I can tell you that I'm the same at home and at work. But cool. Okay, great. I think with this, we can end this episode. It was a good one. And I will say before we say goodbye to everybody who's listening and works in a startup and has the power and decision to do these personality assessments, do it. I think it's in the best interest of the company and your team members as well.
Absolutely. And if you don't have that opportunity, do some AI research on it. And I think as a humane leader, it's just interesting to see the different techniques that some of these studies suggest in how to interact with people, and you'll find it helpful.
Nice. Great words. Great advice. Okay.